This is Huge Downs, and I want to give a big round of applause to Vartzilla, John Hatley, Kevin Humphreys, Paul Welling, and Raul Sher Ali for a tremendous introduction to the difficulties experienced out there and what they're planning on doing. And I want to shift focus here now. We're going to the media response during COVID, hosted by MTI Network, Jim Lawrence, Jonathan Chia, Daryl Wilson, and Campbell Houston, examining how COVID has forced the industry to adjust the response to media, crews, families, concerned public during an incident. And to take a note from Siemens Church Institute that I just received about 15 minutes ago, there was a chaplain that went aboard a ship to console two seafarers. This was last week, in fact. They had been extended. Their contracts had been extended months after months after months. And they finally got notification that they had two replacements. Their bags were packed, their tickets were purchased, and then they got notification that those two replacements had contracted COVID-19. There's no telling how long those two seafarers stayed on the ship. I'll turn this over to Jim Lawrence. Take it away, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for joining all of us today. My name's Daryl Wilson. I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Jonathan Chia and Campbell Houston. Just want to talk a little bit about media response and how COVID has impacted our industry, our crews, and most importantly, the crews and their families that are all involved. So if we could look, can I see the next slide, please? Next slide. And just for those of you who may not be aware, may not know who we are at MTI Network, we're a global crisis media response and risk management company. We oversee about 1/5 of the global fleet. 2018 and 2019 saw us handle a little over 1,000 incidents globally. And the way 2020 is looking, we are most certainly going to keep pace with the same statistics. So that's just a little snapshot into who we are and what we're doing. Next slide. We routinely hold media training courses for our clients, which comprise, some of the best and biggest ship owners and ship managers out there. And what we stress to them is it's not so much training to deal with the media, but it's training to protect companies' reputations. And that really comes down to these three words: responsibility, accountability, and transparency. And we're going to look at a few examples of how owners and managers have, lived up to this art of reputation management, as we fondly call it. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've really noticed, the responses and the way that these COVID incidents are handled really differ from port to port, country to country. Geography and political issues come to play. These are just three incidents that actually generated media and were covered in the media. What you have there on the left is an incident that was handled, in an appropriate manner, as you would expect it to be handled in France. The incident on the far right happened in South Africa. It was handled the way, most would expect. The incident in the middle, interestingly enough, was in a South American port. And just to show you a little bit of difference, not only was the vessel quarantined, but they tied two naval vessels up alongside the ship just to really emphasize that it was quarantined and not going anywhere. So there's we see a big difference on the way these incidents are all handled and dealt with locally. Next slide. I think at this point, this has gone on so long, everyone has seen, various episodes or instances of these issues as owners and managers struggle to deal with this and deal with crews who are stuck on board for extended periods of time. We see right now, we're probably globally amongst our fleet of our clients, we're seeing 2 to 3 incidents a week that we're being notified and called to assist with. Probably 30% of those actually make it into the media and generate media coverage. Next slide. We see a lot of stories and information coming out about the vessels and the crews being quarantined. Of course, this generates a fair amount of local coverage at whatever ports it's at. Next slide. And in turn, what this causes is the company, whether it's the owner or the manager, has to come out and engage the media, engage with the local political leaders who are covering this and possibly using it as a platform to speak on. But I think, if you look at all of these responses, it really is the crews and the safety of the crews is the main priority. Next slide. As I said, in a lot of these locations, it's become a political issue, and whether it's re-election time or just a local political leader sees this as an important point, they're quite often quick to come out with a statement to talk about a vessel being quarantined or foreign crews on these vessels and they're sick. And so the local leaders use this as an opportunity to demonstrate that they're protecting their constituents in that area. Next slide. And this is oftentimes picked up not only by the local media, but as you can see here in trade winds, the trade press pick up these stories, and then the next step is for them to call you. They're calling the owner, they're calling the manager, they're looking for a statement. What are you doing? How long will the ship be delayed? So you can see as you look at a lot of the responses to these, there's a common theme about taking care of the crews and the crew's safety and well-being being the top priority. Next slide. Also, if a local leader or a political person is making comments, they may not always have the facts. Here is some stories that came out about a tanker that was quarantined in Antwerp. And there were some allegations made that the captain didn't report sick crew the way they should have. Next slide. And so this is something that, as the owner or the manager is taking care of this, it needs to be responded to very quickly and get the correct information out there. Detailing exactly, what the captain did, what type of pre-arrival notifications are made. If there were any, suspected COVID cases or sick crew members, that this was all documented and relayed to the authorities ahead of time to try and tone this story down and get the facts corrected. Next slide. And we're seeing COVID impact the industry in a lot of different ways. It's not just, sick crew members, or it's not just a vessel being delayed, which of course has far-reaching ramifications. If the vessel is delayed 10 days in a port, you can just see what that does to the schedule and the financial impacts as well for everyone involved. We're also seeing it, impact our industry in various ways. We still have a humanitarian issue going on at sea in the Mediterranean. Migrants are still attempting to cross the water in, unsafe vessels. We just recently had a migrant case that, I think everyone in the industry saw. They were kept on board a tanker for 38 days. And one of the concerns raised by the surrounding countries was the fact that no one knew the health status of these migrants. So it posed a real problem for offloading the migrants and who would accept them, not knowing their health conditions. Next slide. And let us not forget that within the industry, business is still going on day to day. Vessels, occasionally still have issues. We're still having some, the standard incidents, whether it's a collision, a grounding, a spill, that poses its own unique challenges. We've heard from a lot of different responders, whether it's, spill cleanup experts or salvers, just trying to get to these different locations presents a real problem. And then, people scheduling to go to these responses to work. Some of them are requiring that they arrive 14 days early so that they can quarantine for 14 days before they can ever start to work. So it is, presenting a lot of different issues with physical responses as well.
Daryl, if I may, I'd love to jump in. I think the particulars of how they've handled this response are really interesting. Since they had these 9 cases at the beginning of the summer, they took a short pause, a stand down to let everyone sort of quarantine for the right amount of time while they worked out a solution. And what they've done is they've actually rented out an entire resort facility that is going to be used exclusively for the on-the-water responders, that's the people that are involved in removing the vessel, as well as any pollution response crews. And that resort has a dock, so they're going straight from being on the water right to the hotel where the meals will be provided. They're not allowed any outside interaction between when they enter that bubble and when the vessel is gone and the cleanup is fully signed off on and complete. So as you can imagine, that's a huge undertaking that they've had to make.
Yeah, it presents some real unique challenges and working environments, which, not surprisingly though, in this industry, they've taken the challenge and adapted and overcome. But we are seeing a lot of examples like this of how the industry is adapted and still performing. So next slide, please. Yeah, just I think some big issues that we've really seen are the crews. We've all at this point probably heard stories of the crews being stuck on board. But they've just done a heroic job of continuing to work well past their expected contract dates, and a lot of times, even when crews have been able to come off ships, we've seen where the replacement crew had problems and were not able to meet the ship or were not able to get on the ship. So by default, the crew that's on there remains stuck on board. Next slide. That's actually a duplicate. So could we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. You know, and not just the crews, you know, it's the families as well. We can't forget the families of these crew members who, you know, have been at sea maybe 12 or 15 months, are some of the numbers that we've heard. We have to remember that there's loved ones back home, and I think it's really crucial that they are not forgotten, especially, you know, if you're using third-party crew managers. Definitely want to stay in touch with them and just make sure that, you know, the families are being kept informed and looked after just as well as the crews are on board the ships. Next slide. You know, I think at this point, most of us have seen some examples of how we've grasped, you know, technology to continue working using virtual platforms. Have to give credit to, you know, the owners and managers out there who have adopted this as well. We've seen numerous examples of, you know, senior management recording videos, sending them electronically to the ships to engage the crew, having virtual, you know, platforms, virtual meetings using Skype or Teams or, you know, Zoom meetings, webinars to talk to the crews at sea, and just get the messages across to them. And we've also seen some great examples of the crews, you know, sending pictures and video back. So it's been really humbling to see all of this develop. Next slide. And as I said in the you know, 2 slides back, it's not just the crews. We have to remember it's a whole package deal with these crews, and that they have loved ones, they have spouses, they have parents who, you know, half a world away, haven't seen their loved ones in many months in some instances. So it's very crucial that you know all of your partners and ensure that everyone is being looked after. I think, you know, in your list of stakeholders on who to engage and who to keep informed, it's, you know, besides your customers and your clients, it's just important to have the crews and their families listed in that list of stakeholders to engage. Next slide. Yeah, at this point, I'd like to, I'm going to pass the reins over to Jonathan and Campbell and let them continue on.
Thanks, Daryl. These are really only a portion of the incidents and types of challenges that we've been involved with during COVID, between pilotage and surveys, bunkering, port state control, travel, board meetings, hiring, firing, and so many more aspects of business that have been changed by COVID. I'm sure that every single one of you watching has a story about how COVID has impacted your business that we could all learn from. And I really hope that during the Q&A, you all will share some of those stories. But no matter what the issue's been, it's been our experience that proficient internal and external communications has always had a key role in achieving resolution. Next slide. So while some companies have returned to the office, most have not, or do so on a very restricted basis. No longer is it possible to pop into someone's office or chat at the water cooler. We've replaced office life with Zoom life, and now spend hours per week on calls trying to replace what before could just be shouted across the hall to a coworker. And when you work from your cell phone and laptop, you're never away from your desk. We've all taken calls late at night or on supposed days off, and without hesitation. But without time to unplug, your work will eventually suffer. And with restrictions in many places poised to extend well into 2021, many of us will not have seen our coworkers in over a year. We've missed the summer cookouts, and soon we're going to miss the holiday parties that traditionally bring teams together. And how many of you have met someone at an industry event and gone on to do business with them? Or how many of you have agreed to a deal subject terms with an old colleague over a beer? Shipping has always been a highly personal industry that's founded on trust and relationships. The likes of SHIPPINGInsight and Marine Money continues to provide us with forums to hear from the leaders of our industry, but the interpersonal component is really challenging to replicate. Now, the shoreside challenges that we face are real, but we shouldn't forget that it's the seafarers who face the greatest burdens of COVID-19. Your crew with extended contracts or no contract at all, who don't know when they'll go home or how they'll get there. They've had incredible stresses added to an already demanding profession. And we must all make every effort to see that the world's seafarers aren't forgotten during this crisis. Next slide. And we shouldn't forget, and we should really take great pride in the fact that our industry sustained global trade through an unprecedented upheaval. And to do so, shipping took a 10-year leap in modernization, along with many other industries. And many of these changes will stay with us once COVID has fallen to the history books. We've all found new ways to work and embrace digital tools to engage with our people around the world. And with that, I want to hand it over to John in the next slide.
Thanks, Campbell. So just to recap what Campbell said and Daryl said about earlier. So really the acceleration of digital tools and communication is here to stay. Even though the shipping industry may have been somewhat of a laggard, they have, from what we've seen from our clients, they're definitely up to speed now. And just to reiterate on what Daryl was saying, a little of what we've gone over already, if information and action is communicated correctly and in a timely manner, you help mitigate risk of misinformation going out about the crisis, misallocation of resources, doing it or because of misinformed public, or simply reducing panic and anxiety about the crisis. So this is where we kind of insert, shameless promotional slide. We came up with a digital platform called Crisis Pigeon, which helps our clients communicate during moments of crisis. Think of it as your digital carrier pigeon for information during a crisis. And I won't prattle on about it any further, read capabilities, but if you are interested, make sure that you go to crisispigeon.com and we can kind of catch up there. So if you go to the next slide, so if you could just, an example of the Crisis Pigeon in action is that we were, I believe you need to go to the next slide, please. Fantastic. So one of the incidents that we're now deploying Crisis Pigeon on is an incident that occurred over a year ago, where a car carrier capsized just off the coast of Georgia. When we arrived on scene just over a year ago, there was no prepared or turnkey solution, and it took days to cobble together the right tools to make sure that the unified command of the incident and the responsible party could communicate effectively with the public and key stakeholder groups. So what did this mean? This meant that there was information delays, which led to guesswork by reporters and public who did not have the right facts. It meant greater levels of reporting due to the lack of information, and we were unable to identify key leaders in the community and bring them into a circle of trust, as you might think, on the incident, and have them be representatives inside those key moments and also help distribute information. Now, a year later, we are handling the communication through the Crisis Pigeon platform, which has allowed for easier distribution of factual information on the incident. It's also being established as the one source of truth for the incident and allowing interested parties to subscribe for news alerts and updates so everyone kind of feels involved. The result of this has been a reduced reporting on the response. And when there is reporting, it's primarily neutral or positive, which is really great to see. But most importantly, there's been a great reduction of misinformation, rumors, or guesswork on behalf of the public or the press. This need for communication has become extremely crucial when COVID-19 hit the US. So response crews were hindered due to the pandemic and therefore also the progress on the removal operations. So we need to be able to convey those messages to key stakeholders, and all traditional channels were somewhat unavailable to us. And one of those traditional channels was, community outreach and liaison efforts, which was actually being headed up by the US Coast Guard. Those teams could no longer go and do community meetups or conduct in-person meetings. So they looked to us to provide some sort of solution for that, and then enter virtual press conferences and town halls. So if you go to the next slide. What we did is that we, and actually we mentioned this earlier with regards to key, good risk communication can help solve reducing public outcry. What we did for the Golden Ray is that we held virtual press conferences and town halls, which allowed the unified command to reach out to those people that we'd be normally doing in-person meetings with. So how we did that is that we utilized the technology not too dissimilar to the webinar technology that we're using today. And we actually had them broadcast to those different constituencies. So what did that, and in doing that, what we found is that there was much greater attendance as people could tune in from anywhere to hear what the unified command had to say, making it far more accessible and equitable for the people that were most interested in the incident. And we were still able to have Q&A sessions like they do in the in-person events. So people could still felt like they were engaged, still felt like they were hearing their voices and concerns heard, and the unified command had the ability to respond to them directly. We also found that there was much more control of the environment digitally, and it's actually something that we believe will stay in the future. And that is the fact that we were able to really make sure that everybody was having a say within the group, so not one member was dominating the room. And so we were able to activate different people's mics to make sure that when they asked questions, it was being distributed across the crew. We were also able to minimize bad actors in the group. So if, for example, somebody was, continuing to be, not progressive with regards to the way that we wanted the conversation to go, you could just, hide, you could mute their camera and their mic and turn on somebody else in the group. And then finally, we found that the virtual event allowed for a reduction in mob or herd mentality. It didn't allow for groups to gather and rile each other up. And so the event never kind of got out of hand, and it made for a much more streamlined and focused information sharing session. Campbell and Darryl, do you want to add anything onto that? I know that you're a part of that as well.
All right. No, I think you covered it all really well. I mean, this was really kind of a groundbreaking event for us. To our knowledge, it's the first time that they've held a virtual press conference or virtual town hall meetings here in the U.S. on a ship response. So there were a lot of lessons learned for us, but it worked. The authorities were pleased. The Coast Guard was pleased with the outcome of it, and we suspect going forward, as long as COVID is still here, we'll continue our public engagement with virtual meetings and virtual press conferences.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard's been, I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
No, Campbell, I was just going to move on, so please.
The Coast Guard's been really pleased with the tools that MTI and the QIs have brought to the table. They see it as moving towards a goal they've had a long time, which they call their common operating picture, where every party, no matter where you're sitting, has access to the exact same information at the same time. And that's really critical to they see that as being really critical at a federal level, but really all parties will benefit from that. And we've made great progress to that during COVID-19.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. If you move on to the next slide. Yeah, this is just another example or application where we use Crisis Pigeon, where we were creating a crew communications portal. So Darryl talked about this a little bit earlier with crews being quarantined in port and all that. So we did this for a cruise ship operations company that had a vessel held off the coast of Uruguay due to COVID-19 infections on board the vessel. Passengers were escorted off the ship, but the crew remained and kind of unsure of what was going to happen next. And so the CEO and management decided to create a crew information portal that could be the place for them to get updates from management on the situation, for a place where they could communicate with one another as a crew, because each of them were kind of sequestered to their rooms for health reasons, and then also a place for families to be able to review how the crew are living and kind of get a holistic picture of the situation that their loved ones were going through. And if you go to the next slide, this is a little bit of a see and say slide, but what this crew portal did was that it allowed us to help get everyone on the same page. So, we had at the beginning of this, the incident, there were a lot of rumors and misinformation going around. And that was just a function of, people kind of continue to tell different stories or omit different parts of it and things like that. And so this kind of became one place that people would go to, get all the right information. It also provided full transparency to the crew and the crew's families. So what we did on this portal was that we kept all the communications to the crew. We made public, so that they could all see the different comms that were going on. But then we also were posting official communications to the different governments that we were trying to get their participation and help with in order to get the crew back to their home countries. This was also a place where we would post letters of support and gratitude. So people from passengers that were let off, that were sad to leave the crew behind, were sitting in letters, and this is a place that we were posting all that sort of information so that the crew had a greater sense of community and had some idea that there was understanding and caring coming their way from the people that had something to do with their lives just before they were quarantined. And then what we also did is that we started to post official communications and kind of actions that the industry was taking as a general to kind of help put into context with the crew all the different barriers that the industry was trying to overcome in order to make help these different seafarers. So that really are the two primary examples of how we've been utilizing digital tools during this post-COVID-19 world, specifically through Crisis Pigeon. But if you go to the next slide, Daryl, I'll let you take the charge on this one. This is just generally when we're thinking about this time and this, and what we're wanting to offer to the industry, these are kind of the three things that we recommend that we can help with in this post-COVID-19 world. Daryl, do you want to take this away?
Yeah, I just, those of you who are familiar with us know that we run several different types of training courses. We train general staff, we train senior management. You may have been used to us coming in and bringing cameras and microphones and lights, to put senior management, in the hot seat, so to say, for our various media training courses. But we run them at different levels. And also, we run seafarer seminars. And I think, the point to get across is these training courses and these seminars are still going on for us. Our clients still require this training. The training, in certain instances is even mandatory, depending on, possibly who you have contracts with, or, if you're following TMSA, you'll know there's a portion of TMSA that covers media responsibility and media training for tanker owners and operators. We're still doing these courses. We just did 2 last week with a very large, public ship owning company. As you can imagine, they're virtual. We, just like you, we've embraced the new technology and are still conducting these seminars and presentations. So it's still just as important, if not even more important now, because everything is being done virtually. I think everyone at this point is probably used to seeing a Skype interview on CNN with management of some company. So the same is expected of us in the shipping industry. I think you guys have anything you want to add to that slide?
No, I think that was fantastic, Daryl. It's been a really challenging year, but it's been incredible to see all the companies we work with, how well they've adopted and really stepped up to face these challenges. It's been tough for all of them, but I haven't seen anyone fail at it. Everyone's really risen to the occasion, and that's been great to be a part of.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered a few different examples of things. As we said, the usual things are still happening in our industry. We have ships detained for MARPOL issues. We're still having collisions and spills and various issues. And on top of that, we now for several months have had COVID creating more issues for us. So there's just, a multitude of things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Just within MTI, we average about 3 incidents a day globally amongst our offices. That seems to be the going the going rate for about the past 3 years now. So it's quite busy out there with stuff happening. So I just, the engagement with the public, engagement with your stakeholders. And as I said, hopefully you have crews and their families included in that group. It's just as important today as it was, before COVID. So hopefully we have some questions that the audience would like to throw at us.
Yeah, I think.
All right. Well, it looks like the host is saying there are no questions. So hopefully we answered everyone's questions for them. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate you listening to us. And, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments afterwards. Thank you very much.